Thank you for joining, everyone. We'll be getting started in just a moment as people trickle in. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Teo Wolf with the Spike Lab, and I'm joined here by Natasha de Sherbinin and Lloyd Nimetz, who I'll introduce on the next, or who introduce themselves on the next slide.
Hi all, thanks for joining this evening. My name is Natasha de Sherbinin. I am the Director of College Advising at A-List Education. And if you aren't familiar with A-List Education, we guide students through every step of the college application process, starting with test prep and going through the whole application process, 9th through 12th grade.
Hey everyone, I'm Lloyd Nimetz. I'm the founder and chief coach at the Spike Lab. And the Spike Lab is a one-on-one teen coaching program, very much modeled after a youth startup incubator model to help students find their purpose and have impact in the world. I'm from New York, and I'm sort of a serial entrepreneur. I've started a number of things and now helping other young adults do the same.
So we want to start off tonight by getting to know who's with us in the room tonight. So if you could fill out these two quick poll questions for us. We just want to know what grade you're in. If you are a parent attending this webinar, you can fill it out for your child, and then where you are tuning in from this evening. All right, let's check out our results. So we have a lot of 11th graders, about 50% 11th graders, but we do have some in the younger grades and then a couple 12th graders, and then mostly from the Northeast, New England and Mid-Atlantic. But we do have some people tuning in from the Midwest, West, and International, so welcome. We're glad to have you guys with us this evening. So I'm gonna run through the agenda for the evening. We're gonna start off by talking about how we can stand out to colleges in the application process. And I'm going to give a few examples of areas where you can stand out. And then Lloyd's going to dive into how you build out a standout profile by highlighting three main characteristics: unique, purposeful, and impressive. And then we will leave some time at the end for Q&A. Feel free to use that chat box or the Q&A feature throughout the presentation to ask questions as we move through the webinar. All right. So to start out, how are ways that we can stand out in the college admissions process? One of the ways you can stand out is the college essay, which I did a whole webinar 2 weeks ago. But tonight, this evening, we're going to talk about the other way to stand out, which is extracurricular activities. I'm sure most of you know that if colleges wanted to, they could fill a class multiple times over with students who are academically qualified and who could be successful on that campus. So as a student, we need to think about other ways that we can really stand out in that process. Colleges are really interested in knowing what students are doing in their free time. It helps colleges understand, what makes a student tick. It also helps them visualize what you will be or what kind of student you will be when you get to their campus, and how you really will impact the community that you're joining. So when we think about extracurricular activities, we like to think of them as well lopsided instead of well-rounded. You may have heard well-rounded is good for applying to college because it shows that you're involved in a lot of different things. But we actually believe that, and we know from my former experience working in an admissions office and what we've heard from admissions counselors across the country, that really commitment and genuine focus on fewer activities that build over time is preferable to having kind of your hands in a million different areas without really going into depth in those areas. So colleges really want to see a true commitment to 4 to 7 activities. And students should look to pursue unique and creative opportunities that are really going to help them show off their strengths and interests. Again, colleges want to be able to picture the type of student you'll be on their campus and how you'll really influence their community. So by being able to understand your extracurriculars and your interests, they can start to begin to understand who you will be as a student on their campus. This is a quote from Tufts University. So if you don't believe what I'm saying, you can hear it right from the words of admissions office at Tufts. They say, most people think about knowledge within a traditional classroom setting, but you've gained insight into yourself and the world and other realms of your life as well. That is why we value your extracurriculars. What you do with your time outside of class can tell us a lot about your interests. So how do we choose extracurricular activities? There's a couple ways you want to think about extracurricular activities, and these are just some things to keep in mind as you start to think about the different categories of activities you can choose from when you're in high school. So first, one way that you can explore extracurricular activities is by committing to making a difference. So that could be doubling the number of students involved in a community service activity. It could be making a difference in others' lives. But it should be able to be measured and impactful so that when you're writing about it in your application, you can really show admissions counselors the difference that you've made. Another way to think about extracurriculars is by supporting a worthwhile cause or creating a product of some sort. So you could create a new website for your school or activity. You could organize a speaker series at your school around issues of women and leadership. Whatever speaks to you. Again, it's important that you're choosing something that really connects with your own interests because colleges are going to want to see, you know, maybe if she's interested in women and leadership, this is something that she'll want to pursue on our campus as well. You should also think about learning something or developing a skill or talent. So maybe you become an expert on fireflies, for example, or gain fluency in a foreign language like Japanese, or learn to become a first-rate improviser. Those are just a few things that you can think about. And this summer, when we might have more time than usual, this is a great time to learn a new skill or talent. Finally, you can think about reaching a goal. So this would be a big goal, right? Something like becoming an Eagle Scout, which we know takes a lot of time and commitment, or maybe making the varsity team of a sport. So those are a few different ways you can start to think about extracurriculars. We're going to dive into a few examples in a bit. All right, we're going to start with community service. So it's really important when you think about community service that you're finding opportunities that are unique and meaningful. So when you're thinking about how can I contribute to my community, thinking about something that really aligns with your own interests. So again, going back to the women in leadership example, if it is something that you're really passionate about, maybe you find a women's shelter in your community that you can volunteer at. Some of the questions you should be thinking about is, is this a unique opportunity? Can you really commit to it? So I work with a lot of students who, when they are filling out the activities list for their college applications, they'll say, can I put down that service day that my school does every, September on a Saturday? And if you've only done it for a day of the entire school year, it's really not that impressive to colleges. And I tell students not even to bother putting that on their application. It really needs to be an activity that you've showed a long-term commitment to. You should also think, will this allow me to demonstrate leadership or responsibility? How can you find opportunities that will allow you to show leadership in different ways that you might not have in your own school? Again, going back to, does it align with my interests and strengths? Is it seemingly random that I'm doing this activity, or is it something that I really care about and comes through my application in other places? And then finally, does it require initiative and perseverance? So it should be something that shows that you have taken this upon yourself. It wasn't just handed to you. This is something that you truly care about, and you're taking the time to make sure that you are contributing to that cause. I just wanted to highlight at the bottom, that admissions counselors are less concerned with what you did, but rather how and why you did it. And that's something that's going to keep on coming up throughout the presentation. And so just keep that in the back of your mind as you think about all these different opportunities. All right, so we decided to put these all into one category because I don't know if you know, but this summer is going to be a little bit different depending on where you are and where you're tuning in from. Things are a little bit different in the world right now. So, sometimes students are thinking about going off to a program on a college campus. A lot of those have moved online. Some students will look at doing internships. A lot of those have moved virtual or been canceled. So we kind of put them all together as, in an ideal world, if things are open, and maybe if you're in a younger grade, these are things you can think about doing in the future. But so here are some of the opportunities that we start to think about for the summer. So the first is internships. Internships can be great because you can start to practice networking, building your resume. It allows you to gain confidence in yourself and really develop interpersonal skills. And then it also shows colleges that you've really taken on some responsibility. And it's another form of leadership. University programs, I mentioned before, but that really allows you to experience what college is like. It prepares you for college and exposes you to college level classes and college faculty and what's it like to be able to work with a professor and form those relationships with professors at the college level. Another popular activity in the summer that I haven't found a way to do it yet this summer, but if you know of one, let me know, is studying abroad. I am desperate to get abroad this summer, but I don't think it's going to happen. But there's other ways that you can explore cultures from your home. So thinking about ways that you can, maybe it's, studying a language or studying the history in a particular area, or dance, flamenco from Spain, for example. So there's different ways that you can kind of explore their cultures from home. But this is important because it really shows colleges that you're thinking it allows you to kind of think about things from a different perspective and grow your worldview, which is something that colleges care about deeply. And then we've talked about before, massive open online courses, MOOCs, and edX classes. So these are free online courses. I recommend that you check some of these out for the summer if you are at home and bored. They have courses on every subject you could ever imagine. And this will, again, show initiative, leadership. It also gives you an opportunity to become kind of an expert or almost expert in an area of interest, which will allow you ultimately to write more interesting college essays. If you think you might want to study marine biology in college, if you're able to get some exposure to that class earlier on in your high school career, you can then really, truly, authentically write about why you love marine biology once it comes time to apply to college. And then lastly, just thinking creatively out of the box, thinking about starting a lawn care company or running some kind of business. But bottom line, again, is returning to the fact that the why is always more important than the what. It doesn't exactly, you could pick a million different opportunities within these categories, but unless it connects to you, it's going to be meaningless to colleges and the college admissions counselors. So really making sure that you're connecting that personal purpose, which Lloyd will talk about later on this presentation, to the extracurricular opportunities that you're choosing. I'll talk briefly about some research opportunities that you could think about either, maybe this summer if you're able to find virtual opportunities, but certainly in the future. So research opportunities, if you are pursuing one at a university level, you've been able to get in touch with a professor who will allow you to contribute to research that summer. That can be a great opportunity for you to make a connection with someone at a college, to understand how to do research. And then also, that supervisor could write you a letter of recommendation in the future. So in a traditional setting, this would happen on the college campus, but there's lots of programs out there that allow students to do this work virtually. And a lot of them will connect you with a mentor to help you guide your research projects. So if that's something you're interested in, again, it can really help you write a more detailed and interesting answer to your college essay questions. And it also allows you, I didn't say this earlier, but allows you to really understand if you like that subject or not. Because you might think you like marine biology, but when you take the class and you realize you don't like it, you've then saved yourself an entire, fall semester of courses once you get to college. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about leadership development. I think leadership is kind of a buzzword in the college world. And so we're going to help to kind of break down what leadership can really look like. So whenever you pursue a leadership role, it's really important that you're staying true to yourself, that it's authentic, that you're not just doing it for the title. And then, thinking about 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade, your leadership should really develop throughout high school. Colleges are looking, no one really expects a 9th grader to enter the fall and already have some kind of leadership role within their community. That's expected to develop over time. So by the time you get to be a senior, you are the head of the club or the captain of your varsity team. But we're going to talk about how those are not like the only examples of leadership. Leadership can look very different. So I just wanted to put in these two quotes, one from Penn and one from Carleton, that kind of highlight what they're looking for with leadership in an application. Penn seeks students with an initiative and developed capacity as a leader, role model, and doer. And Carleton College says that it is not impressed with students who have joined many groups, but have no significant involvement or leadership in any of them. So I see this a lot when I work with students, is they might have a full list of clubs that they're involved in, but they actually don't really do much within those clubs. They might show up for a meeting every once in a while, but they're not actually contributing that much to the club. And I've even seen that with some students who have a leadership role, whether it be president or treasurer or secretary. I ask them what they've done for the club, and they have a hard time coming up with something that was really, impactful, something that made a difference within that club. So, it's not a box to check if you get that leadership role. You really need to be able to tell colleges how you use that leadership role and how it's helped develop you as a leader, so they can visualize what kind of leader you'll be once you get to their campus community. So as you think about some opportunities for leadership, here are a few questions you can ask yourself. The one thing I want to get back to is that, the leadership role doesn't necessarily have to be limited to school activities. Some of our students have leadership roles through working with their family. Maybe they pick up their little sister or little brother from school every day and get dinner started. So leadership can look different than just what students typically think about, which is like the captain or the club president. There's many different ways you can interpret leadership, and thinking about students who take initiative, who, again, make a difference. Leadership does not have to be contained to those traditional leadership roles that you might find within a school community. So here are some questions to think about. Have you been a founder, a president, or the first of something important? Served as a captain, a member of a championship team, or maybe you're an individual champion, and that could be for an athletic team or for an academic team. Have you progressed from regular member status to leadership position throughout your high school career? Have you changed the nature of an organization? So this is another thing I want to point out, is you don't have to have the title to show leadership. You could be just a member of a club, but if you're able to change the nature of that organization and made it better or more effective in some way, that is certainly demonstrating leadership. And then finally, have you gone beyond the norm in terms of the contribution to the group, team, or project? So I've had students who have really taken on leadership roles within just, classroom projects, group projects that they've had to do, and can talk at length about the specific things they've done to contribute as a leader to those projects. So I encourage you to think outside of the box when it comes to leadership, but it is really important that in some capacity you are showing leadership, and it's developed throughout your high school career. All right, so I'm going to pass it over to Lloyd.
Great. Thanks, Natasha. So building on what Natasha has been saying, I want to give you a super mini checklist, which also serves like a agenda for what I'll be talking about. Being unique, impressive, and purposeful, and what that really means in the context of applying to colleges and really standing out among millions and millions of students throughout the world. This is for the first time teenagers you're on the world stage, and it's stressful and hard, and we'll talk about what colleges are looking for in these dimensions. So starting with uniqueness, I want to start by really calling out there are two paths, and both paths are to really standing out in terms of in terms of uniqueness is being world-class in something common and being great in something uncommon. So the example of a recruited basketball player, or really any recruited athlete, or a science Olympiad gold medalist, and on and on. These are people who are world-class in something that is relatively common in the sense of, these are things. A lot of people play basketball. A lot of people are, studying in a specific subject, or even like an actor, a Broadway actor or a movie star who, Natalie Portman got into Harvard. she was world class in something common. There are a lot of actors out there, youth actors. So that's the first category. Most students just aren't, that isn't the right path. But for some that is. And so I just want to make a clear point that there isn't one way or the other. This presentation will be more about the latter, which is the option of becoming great at something that's more unique, more uncommon. And so, if you're thinking about which is the right path for you, you should keep in mind that the first is better for people who thrive within structure, within organizations, and are a little more risk averse. And the riskiness of this is that you're up against the world, and that's pretty hard. There's a lot of competition. And then for the other pathway, this is much better for people who are a little more risky, more independent, willing to go the take the road not taken. And I this is graduation season, so I can't help but the most common poem used in college graduations and probably high school graduations is Robert Frost's poem, The Road Not Taken. And I'm just going to say it, part of it for any of you. If you don't know the poem, is two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. That's what we'll be talking about today, is taking that road less traveled and using that to make the difference of getting into college. But of course the risk there is that it's hard. There's no structure for you. You have to figure out what to do. You have to find something that is unique, and then you could get blocked. This is very abstract. So a quick example is beekeeping. So comparing like basketball and beekeeping, we have a student who became an urban beekeeper. She became, one of the best teenagers in the world at learning how to take care of bees in an urban environment and develop a honey business and fight pollution and save the bees. So that's a lot less common, and it's easier to stand out, if you take a route that's more unique, but it's harder to find out what to do and to actually follow through. Okay, so we'll be focusing more on this second path, but again, both are fine. So the second category, in that checklist I brought up, is impressiveness. And there's a lot baked into what makes something impressive. So I just want to unpack that a little bit here with these, initiative, impact, expertise, and recognition. So initiative, pretty self-explanatory, taking something, an idea, and taking action to make it real. That is a huge part of leadership that Natasha talked about earlier. And it really, if you have that initiative at a young age, it's very impressive, because most students don't. They require the structure that schools give them, and the clubs and the pathways that are laid out for young people. So if you've really shown initiative, it does tend to be impressive and help you stand out. Second is impact. And this is impact going beyond good intentions. So a lot of people want to have impact. They can talk about the impact they want to have, but if you can actually speak of the impact that you've had, and again, tying that, we'll get to this, but tying that back to your story and the why that Natasha is talking about, not just impact for impact's sake, but impact that is meaningful to you. The next is expertise. So this is high school world expert, is what that HS stands for here. So building an expertise, the example of the urban beekeeper, she was very, very knowledgeable about not just urban beekeeping, but colony collapse disorder, which is, the condition of bees are dying in rural environments due to pesticides and the implications of that on the environment. And, so building expertise in some area, the more narrow, the better, or else it's very, very hard. And then lastly, recognition. Because you're going out on your own, there aren't usually as established awards or, the sort of accolades that you get from, just being able to say you're a recruited athlete, or you have a a gold medal Olympiad. So you have to find other ways to prove that you've done something significant. That can be in the form of impact itself, but also through press and other types of awards that do exist, and having champions. Champions is our term for people who recognize that you've done a great thing, and those people in and of themselves are impressive. So an influencer in the space, a professor, etc. So now the next category is here Purposeful, and this is probably the one that's closest to my heart. And so if I get very animated and passionate, I apologize in advance. So this guy on the left is just another Bill, but he's like a hero to me. He's a professor at the Stanford Graduate School of Education. I went to Stanford Business School, so I had some interactions with him, but more recently in the work I'm doing. But what makes him interesting is he's the founder of a center called the Center for Adolescent Development at Stanford within the Graduate School of Education. And he's basically the grandfather of purpose research. So purpose didn't have a lot of academic rigor before this guy. And now there are a lot of people doing research on what is purpose, what impact does having purpose have on you and on people. And what the research has found is that purpose is one of the best contributors, or it's most correlated to living longer, happiness, financial success, and health. So it's a really powerful thing, and he's done quite amazing work that I recommend you looking at. And his definition, as you see here, for purpose is what you read here. This idea of something meaningful to the self, and consequential to the world beyond the self. And so we summarize that as meaningful and impactful. So, and there's an internal and external dimension to having purpose. It's meaningful, only you know if it's really meaningful. So you can go out and say, I want to save the animals, and that's a wonderful cause, obviously, that's dear to my heart. That's probably why I thought of it. But that's not, if that's not your thing, if that doesn't drive, push your buttons, get you emotional and tied to your story, then that's not as meaningful an area to go down. Impactful is external focus. So how can you help others? What impact are you going to have outside of yourself? So if you're focusing exclusively, I'm getting some sort of phone call. I don't know what's happening. Sorry, let me just deal with this situation. Okay, I think we're back. All right, so I lost my train of thought. So if you're impactful, if you're planning on working on just building expertise around something and learning and being an expert, but you're not actually going out and helping and driving impact for others, then it's missing a piece of purpose. That's meaningful. It can be rewarding and you learn a lot, but it won't necessarily be a part of purpose. So, his research, I'll go through a little bit quickly, but basically his most famous research paper went out and interviewed thousands of young people between the ages of 12 and 22 and found and categorized them in these 4 categories of the dabbler, the dreamer, the disengaged, the purposeful. And jumping to sort of the main point here is that a very small percentage, less than 20% of them were the purposeful, meaning that they had clear interest, they had that sense of meaning, and they were pursuing it through action. Most young people are dabbling, they're jumping around, or they have something they care deeply about, but they're not really doing much. They're the dreamer, or they don't have any of that, and they're sort of in their social media and they're doing their schoolwork, but they haven't found something that gives them a sense of meaning. And I'm bringing this up because if you're a college admissions officer, you're seeking that small percent of applicants who have answers to these questions, who have a sense of purpose. What gives meaning? It gives my life meaning. How do I want to contribute to the world? They're looking to build a community on their campus of people who have something to bring to the campus, who have that drive and deeper, not just initiative, they're able to do things, but the emotional sort of engine behind it, which is purpose. And so, this is very hard to do, to find this, and it doesn't mean you're set for life. If you don't have purpose in your teenage years, you won't have it for life. And it doesn't mean that if you don't have it in high school, or if you have it, then it'll be the one for the rest of your life, because purpose has shown to change and evolve as you go. But they are looking for it. And one of the things that I throw in my personal opinion here is that there's so much talk about stress as one of the biggest problems for high schoolers, and it is, but meaninglessness, I would argue, is even a bigger problem. And it's actually a driver of stress. If you don't have a sense of meaning and you feel lost as to what you're going to do with your life, it's a horrible feeling, and it drives a lot of the stress. The students and I'll give you some examples that we work with, it's amazing the transformation that happens and the emergence of greater confidence and self-worth when you have a sense of, I'm doing something that matters to me. And that tends to anchor a sense of identity, and takes out a lot of the stress in that period of life. So purpose is key. So here's an example, hopefully that ties all this abstract talk together and makes it a little more concrete. So Julia is this young woman on the left, and she developed a project that we call a Spike. That's why we call it the Spike Lab. That hopefully, I'll give you the example of how it incorporates all these elements. So she actually grew up. She's from Taiwan, and is applying to U.S. colleges as an international student. And she was really interested in cosplay. When we met her, one of her biggest interests was cosplay, which is, not everyone knows what that is. Basically, using makeup and disguise to dress up as your favorite, like a character in an anime or in any sort of character. And it's a fun thing to do for young people. And there are conventions, and there's a lot of sort of, it's a hobby. And so that was a big thing for her. She's also interested in photography and the arts. And so, long story short, she ended up developing a project, but in her search, sort of her self-discovery process of what shapes who she is and what's important to her, she realized, she knew this, but it was sort of in the back of her mind when thinking about what to do, is she's the daughter of a single mom, and there's a lot of stigma in Taiwan, where she's from, around that, and it shaped her identity in some very powerful ways. And so she decided to go out and interview a lot of other children of single parents, and make it part of her self-discovery process and understand their stories, but then create composite characters out of these interviews, and actually build a photography series around, where she would do autobiographical photographs, where she would bring her cosplay skills and kind of act out and dress up as these composite characters. And she built out a photography series and then put it out into the world through actually renting Airbnbs and other things, and doing like pop-up galleries essentially in different parts of Asia. And it wasn't just a gallery, but it was also a place to look at the art as a trigger to, or a catalyst to discuss the issue, which a lot of people don't talk about. And it was a very powerful process for her. It actually ended up getting a bunch of press. And so if you think about like the categories I talked about, like this is very unique. Not a lot of people are doing this. it's impressive in that, I mean, it wasn't huge scale or anything like that, but she showed real initiative. She made real things happen. People came to these. She got recognized through press, and she developed a certain level of expertise in this small area. And it was clearly very meaningful to her because it was very personal. So that's something when you think about is your story. The reason colleges call it the personal statement is it has to be very personal. And so the things you're doing, if they're not purposeful or personal, they're not going to connect as much to that personal statement, and they're not going to be as unique to your story. Okay. I'm looking if I have time for another example here. So these are some other of our students who have done different things that I'm hoping exemplify what I'm talking about. So maybe I'll talk, well, here's some more. So let me take, let me take this concert fundraiser for Syrian refugees. So this is a student we had last summer. And I know we have a lot of rising seniors today, so I think this is a good example. So she was a strong student. She had a bunch of interests, but it's basically the equivalent of Model UN in Europe, and which is not a standout activity. And she ended up, she had always been very interested in and very impassioned by the xenophobia in Spain, where she's from, and particularly refugees who were treated kind of badly or not allowed in, or were suffering as marginalized communities in Spain. And so the short of it is she developed she has a musical background as well, but not like not like a star sort of musician, but she had connections into other musicians. And so she mobilized her friends and some organizations to provide other musicians, and she built out a series of concerts over the summer to raise money for Syrian refugees. And it was very consistent with things she'd already been doing in the past, because that was an issue that she had debated in her Model UN like organization, and she had written some papers on that. And so she was able to, in a short amount of time, pull together a series of fundraisers, and then continue to do some things in the fall semester to show that consistency that Natasha talked about. And so, that was something for people who, if you don't have that much time, hopefully that's a useful example. She actually got into Harvard, Stanford, and Princeton, I think. No, Harvard, Stanford, Yale, all. And so, it really lifted up her profile, I think, significantly. Okay, so those are some examples. I want to leave time for the rest here. Natasha?
Thanks so much, Lloyd. So I'm going to give you just a brief overview of the timeline. I know we have a lot of rising seniors on here, but if you are in the younger grades, thinking about ninth grade as really a year of experimentation. So this is a time for you to get your hands in everything, sign up for every club, really explore and keep an open mind and cast a wide net. By sophomore year, you should start to kind of focus on the activities that you really enjoy. Again, it is not impressive to colleges to have your hands involved in 20 different activities if you're not really involved in those activities. So really start to pare this down and focus on the ones that are really meaningful to you. By junior year, you should be well settled into those favorite activities. And if you haven't done that yet, start to look for ways to make a difference and contribute to those activities in a meaningful way. And certainly if you can start exploring leadership opportunities, that's a good time to do so. At the very least, make sure you're setting yourself up for those leadership opportunities your senior year. And then by senior year, this should be, you're really down to those activities that you really love, you're really committed to, and now you should be showing off some impressive leadership along with your commitment to those activities. And Lloyd's going to highlight a couple of the takeaways from today's webinar.
Yeah, so So just to summarize what you've already heard, well lopsided over well-rounded. We literally called our company the Spike Lab, which is sort of another, being spiky is another word for being well lopsided. So having that depth is, and for anyone who's not familiar, when I went through college admissions, the conventional wisdom is to be well-rounded, and colleges want that. I mean, that is what K-12 education is focused on, building well-rounded individuals. But they also do want to see that depth. They want that standout element for top universities. So having sort of a T-shaped, having some, breadth, but you really need to go deeper in some area. And then why over the what. I think Natasha said that a lot. And just to emphasize that the story, like whatever you do needs to be aligned with your story, with like the part about who you are that you're going to put forward to colleges. There are hundreds of thousands of people who are out there. And so your story should stand out. And then what you do should be an extension of who you are. But it starts with who you are, doesn't start with what you've done. And then just summarizing, look for that uniqueness, find a sense of purpose, incorporate that into what you're doing, and also find that edge of impressiveness. Okay, so now we're gonna go into just a little bit about our organizations, and then questions. And so the Spike Lab, this is our mission statement: purpose-driven innovators for life. As you could tell today, you get a sense of where we're coming from with that mission statement. So, we're very college admission oriented in how we run this sort of entrepreneurship program, but it's essentially a one-on-one coaching program that works with students who come in and might not have a sense of what is their story, or what is the project that they want to do to make their story really come alive. And that's our coach's job. We have a curriculum and a process that helps students find their story and launch their project, their spike into the world. Our coaches are the backbone of everything we do. Here are most of them. And these are pretty amazing individuals who have not just an understanding of the college admission space and have gone and gotten into top schools, but they also have real entrepreneurship experience. Whether it's in the arts or in business or in academics or sports or a combination of all of it, or mission-driven sort of social impact work. There's a mixture of different expertise and experience among our coaches, and we match the coach with the student based on interest and personality. And they work with you as a student through this whole process. Our students start with a 12-week starter package to do that identity work, identify the spike, and then validate the spikes, which is before launching it. And then they can continue on after that on a month-by-month basis, however long they need or want. I'm sure people have a lot of, maybe have questions, logistical questions. If you do, I can answer them later or afterwards. I don't want to take up too much time on boring logistics, but it is a 90-minute weekly meeting on Zoom. So we've always done things remotely, and we haven't been actually highly impacted by the restrictions from the pandemic, except for the fact that it's restricted our students from the type of projects they can do, but they've been very resilient in adjusting and pivoting. So that's it about us.
Awesome. Thanks, Lloyd. So a little bit about A-List. As I mentioned, we do both college advising and test prep. So these are some of the things that we help our students on college advising. If you're interested in learning more about college advising, you can see I have a consultation link there, and we're going to leave that up at the end so that you can copy that down if you'd like to schedule a free 30-minute consultation. Just a little plug for starting your college essay. If you're a rising senior, this is the time now that school's wrapping up. Great time to start thinking about that college essay. Another thing I'll mention is that we do have a college admissions webinar in 2 weeks on June 24th, and we're hosting Binghamton University, Northeastern University, and Trinity College for a panel that will be on the 24th at 5 p.m. and we can send out more information about that. We also do test prep, and so if you are looking to take the test this fall, you can schedule a consult with Dory Schultz, who's our Director of Tutoring. And Teo, if you go to the next slide, you can see some of our numbers for improvement. So we have some incredible tutors, and we're really, really proud of our results that we get with our students. We do one-on-one tutoring, but we're also offering boot camps this summer. So Teo, if you go to that last slide, we have summer boot camps and workshops for both the SAT, ACT, and then I am leading a college essay course and a Common App workshop. Those are for seniors. The test prep, you can get started a little bit earlier if you'd like to, but the college application and essay workshops are specifically for seniors and rising seniors. And you can see there's a link at the bottom there if you want to learn more about those workshops this summer.
Great, so now on to Q&A. So if you have questions, feel free to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the page or just chat them to us and we will try to answer those. First question I have here, this is for you, Natasha, though Lloyd, you can obviously feel free to chime in. If I'm not as strong academically, is it still helpful for me to focus on extracurriculars to stand out, or should my focus be on boosting my grades?
Excellent question. So grades are always the most important factor in a college application. So before, when they're looking, an admissions counselor is looking at every single part of your profile, grades come first, then usually test scores, unless the school is test optional. And then you'll have a myriad of different options, but usually there's some combination of essays, recommendations, and extracurriculars. Extracurriculars certainly are important, but they should not, you should focus on grades. They should not, if your extracurriculars are taking up all your time and it's getting in the way of achieving high grades, focus on school first, because that is always the most important factor in the admissions process.
Yeah, I'll just add to that, these are academic institutions, so they're always going to put the most weight on your academics. And, if it's not at a certain level, you won't get through the first read in the admission cycle. So the first time they read your application, you want to get through the basics that they look for in academics: minimum GPA, minimum test scores. Some different universities have different cutoffs, but I would say that there's a complicated side to this question, which is that what we found is that a lot of students, grades suffer when they're not engaged in school, and they don't have a sense of why this matters or a sense of confidence. And the more a student has confidence and a sense of meaning, grades tend to pick up. There's this interesting sort of synergy that happens. So sometimes having a good extracurricular that really brings you to life can often kick in and help grades go up. So it's a little bit, a little complicated.
Great, thank you guys. So next question here, also from Natasha, is how much time do you need to put into something in order to show commitment?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it's difficult to quantify and give you an exact number. But it can't be that one day thing. It really should. Ideally, you're doing this activity throughout all of high school, but we recognize that that's not always realistic, especially, I have students all the time. For example, I'm working with a student this year who really started out as a STEM kid and loved robotics, and then took AP Gov junior year and is now very into poli-sci and only wants to do political science in the future. And so it's fine to pivot. It is okay to pivot to different activity in the middle of the school year, or your middle of your high school career, but you still need to dedicate time to it. And so I'm very hesitant to give you an exact number, but I would say, if you're filling out a common application, and this is something that you can do, Google just, a common application activities list, and you can see a PDF of what it looks like. They're going to ask you to put in what grades have you done this activity and how much time do you spend per week on the activity. And so thinking about it, and then also if it's a summer activity or when you do all school year or full year. And so thinking about it per week, like this should be something that you're doing weekly. And sometimes an hour a week is fine if it's something like a club. But I also have students who have one activity because they're, they're like semi-pro in gymnastics, and they practice for like 5 hours a day. And that's their only activity because they do it 6 days a week. And they don't have time for anything else. That's okay. But Lloyd, I'd love to hear if you have a magic number. I feel like I didn't do a great job of giving them what they wanted with that.
No, I mean, there is obvious. I think everyone knows there's no number, but I think, I always use the example of if you're planning on getting recruited as an athlete, you wouldn't start the year before. You wouldn't start playing basketball junior year and expect to get recruited. So for different things, there are different expectations. And if you're doing something more uncommon, then the trick is to build, I'm assuming that question is coming from rising seniors who don't have that much time left. And, the answer is to build on the things that you have. Personal things that you might not even think of, like the example of Julia, who built on her personal experience as the daughter of single parent, or and on interests that you've been doing, and then you dive deep into one dimension of that interest, for example. And so it's you're still building on what you have, but yes, there should be a sense that you've been doing it for a long period of time. And when you write your activities and you write your essays, it should seem like you've been committed for a material sense period of time, and there's no number that you can put on that.
Okay, great. So next question here is for Lloyd, which is, I'm a junior and all my activities are pretty common, band, debate, math team. Should I choose new activities to get involved in instead, or is it better to stick to what I'm already doing?
It's similar to the last question. Like, I wouldn't just switch at the end of high school. I definitely would, like I said, build on those and maybe hone in on one of them and get more specific. And so, often what will happen is a student will, like the other example I gave you, and a Spanish student who, she had interest in policy and international relations, and also in music. And she also, she had so many things going on. This is very typical for a high achieving student, is they have lots of things, they've done a bunch of things, but it's sort of, a shotgun. It's like they're all over the place, and it's hard to build that cohesive story. And so that's the power of a spike, that's the power of a project, that if you use this summer and next year to do something that pulls a bunch of them together, not all of them, it's impossible, but a few of the things, the interests, the hobbies, the personal sort of element of who you are, that will give a cohesive story, and it will almost by definition show that commitment that we were talking about earlier, like longer term commitment, because it's pulling together things that you have been doing. So yeah, don't just, you might drop some of them if you need the time. Sometimes it helps students to think about, what would I actually put on my activities section? If so many students who are just like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm literally not putting these 5 things I've spent thousands of hours on. I'm not even putting it on my application. I wish I had known that earlier because I didn't even care about them. And it's like, yes, like think strategically about what Natasha was saying, quality over quantity. Focus on the quality, and you can cut some of the other stuff.
Great. So next question for Natasha here is, how do you recommend choosing extracurriculars as a freshman? I'm worried my son will join clubs his friends are getting involved in.
Yes. First, I would say there's nothing wrong with that, right? You can certainly join a club that you're friends in and still have a really meaningful experience. But I think encouraging students to really dip their toes in everything. So depending, every high school is going to be different in what they offer. But like I said, casting a wide net and joining every single club. Freshman year, it doesn't matter if you drop out of a club or not. You can try something out, go for a few meetings and decide it's not for you. It's not something I encourage students to do all the time, right? You should, when you make a commitment to something, you should stick with it. But ninth grade year is actually kind of the safest year to do that. And in fact, colleges really give students a break for ninth grade year. MIT doesn't even allow students to put in any activities from their ninth grade year. They only ask for 10th, 11th, and 12th grade because they recognize that the transition to high school is challenging, and that students really need that 1 year of leeway to figure themselves out. And by the way, they're figuring themselves out all throughout high school. But it's fine to dabble in a few things, and certainly encouraging your sons or daughters or yourself to really push yourself outside your comfort zone and try out all the different activities, maybe an academic activity, an athletic activity, an art activity, just to see what really sticks.
Yeah, nothing to add. That was perfect.
Go ahead, Lloyd.
No, nothing to add. That was perfect.
Oh, nothing to add. Okay. So let's see. Next question, also for Natasha, I guess, is how do you think APs will be considered this year, and what AP scores should you not report when submitting to colleges?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because APs were so different this year that we don't really have a solid idea of how much they're going to matter in the college application process this fall. But to be frank, AP scores haven't ever carried a ton of weight. It's helpful if it reaffirms an interest in a particular or strength in a particular subject. Like if you're planning on studying psychology in college and you got a 5 on the AP, that's great. It also means that you can likely place out of psychology 101 once you're there as a freshman, which is even greater. But you put it on the Common App, and then APs are really more of a thing that you get to use once you get to college to place out of classes. My general rule is 4s and 5s are pretty strong. If you're applying for a specific major, you want to have a 5 in that. There's sometimes when I'll advise students to submit 3s, but generally I'll say 4s and 5s and above.
Okay, so I think we probably have time for 1 or 2 last questions here, depending on how quickly you guys are able to answer. So we're gonna say last question, but we'll see how quick the answer is here. So question is, which to choose? With test optional admissions this year happening for most colleges, it seems like students need to do even more to stand out, but are there any special things that students should do that is different this year than in previous years?
I can take just a very quick answer. Recommendation letters. Like that is, especially with junior spring being so wonky, and not having grades or, grades are, colleges know that a lot of high schools have said like basically, oh, you can't dip below what grade you have now, right? There's all these different policies in place. And so this year more than ever before, recommendations are going to be important. Recommendations have always been semi-important, but mostly just to validate a student and what's on their application and their character. But this year, it's almost a validation of like what you could have been if everything wasn't canceled this spring. So those are going to hold extra weight this coming season.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I'd add is that, obviously this whole presentation is emphasizing the importance of extracurriculars, and this year it's more than ever because of just the complexity of all these standardized tests. People can't access them, or if they're taking them in bad conditions, or so many test optional. So the non-academic side is going to have more weight than ever before, and so that's the quick answer is everything we said today. Like build out the non-academic side because it's going to have a lot more weight, but also on the academic side, intellectual curiosity will have more weight than ever before. So going up outside the classroom and showing you're doing a MOOC, or you've done an independent research project, and the different ways to show that you're a hustler when it comes to academics, and that can reinforce your academic profile way actually more than AP scores can do, and it's actually like much less time if you consider that there's research that shows that an AP class takes 200 hours more than the regular version of that class. So you can save a lot of time by not taking all those extra APs and putting that towards other intellectual projects that show intellectual curiosity. So yeah, I forgot to say that we have a lot of students doing our Spike program over this summer. And so, we have this link here. And if anyone's interested in understanding how they could pursue these sort of things, pursue a Spike starting over the summer, which is a really great time to start, especially this year because people don't have as much going on this summer. But you can do a Spike and you can do this sort of thing. So I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that.
Great, thank you. Well, as predicted, that was the last question that we had time for. So thank you for joining today. And if you have further questions, you can feel free to book consultations with the links that you see on this slide, with A-List on the left there, and with the Spike Lab on the right there. Anything that either of you would want to add, Natasha and Lloyd?
No, that's it. Thank you so much for joining. I wish you all a wonderful evening.
Yes, and stay safe. And we're talking about webinar fatigue. And thank you for coming despite webinar fatigue.
Yes, and hope everyone has a great evening.
Take care.